Story 1. The Whispering Trees. Marcus, Eliza, and Carl were seasoned campers, but this trip was different. They had ventured deep into the remote Pine Ridge forest, a place far from civilization where the trees loomed like silent giants. The remoteness of the place thrilled them. They had heard rumors, though. Local legends spoke of strange occurrences in these woods, whispers that followed travelers at night. They dismissed the stories as nothing more than campfire tales. By the time they arrived and set up camp, dusk had fallen. As night crept in, the trio sat around the fire, their laughter mingling with the crackling of burning wood. Marcus poked at the flames, eyes glowing with the light. "Ever wonder if the stories are true? About the whispers?" he asked, a grin forming on his face. Carl chuckled. "Nothing to be scared of out here but bears and bad weather." Just then, Eliza froze. "Did you hear that?" They all went silent, straining their ears. Faint, almost imperceptible whispers seemed to drift through the trees. A cold wind followed, stirring the leaves. Marcus frowned. Probably just the wind. But Eliza wasn't convinced. The sound wasn't just the wind. It had a rhythm, a sinister cadence like voices just out of earshot. "It's not the wind," she said, her voice tight with unease. As the night dragged on, the whispers grew louder. Carl tried to laugh it off, but his face betrayed fear. The trees seemed to lean in closer, casting long, jagged shadows. The whispers felt as though they were circling the camp, voices teasing them, staying just out of reach but always present. Unable to sleep, Eliza took her flashlight and stepped into the woods, intending to confront whatever or whoever was making the noise. Marcus and Carl reluctantly followed. The whispers grew louder as they walked, but now they sounded more distinct, like fragmented sentences spoken in a language they couldn't understand. Then, without warning, the whispering stopped. The forest was plunged into complete, unnerving silence. Eliza's flashlight flickered before going out. Panic set in. "We need to get back to camp," Carl muttered, his voice trembling. But when they turned around, the path was gone. Trees that hadn't been there before now blocked their way, and the forest seemed to close in on them. This isn't right," Marcus stammered. Suddenly, from behind them came a sharp, guttural growl, not human, not animal, but something far more menacing. The whispers started again, but now they weren't distant. They were inside their heads. They ran, but no matter how far they went, the trees, the whispers, and that chilling growl followed. They eventually found their way back to camp, but something had changed. Their tents were gone, the fire extinguished, and the air felt thick with an oppressive force. The whispers didn't stop, not until dawn. The three of them left Pine Ridge that morning and never returned. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, Eliza swears she can still hear the whispers. Story 2. The Man in the Woods. Jason and Sarah were on their first camping trip together, a weekend getaway in the peaceful Golden Creek State Park. After a long hike, they found a spot near the edge of a serene lake, the forest dense and quiet around them. It was perfect. They set up camp and watched the sunset, enjoying the isolation. As night fell, the sounds of nature filled the air, crickets, the occasional rustle of a small animal in the underbrush, and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. Everything seemed peaceful. They roasted marshmallows, exchanged stories, and eventually crawled into their tent for the night. It was around midnight when Jason woke up. Something didn't feel right. He lay still, listening intently. The night had become eerily quiet. The usual sounds of the forest were absent. No crickets, no wind, just silence. He nudged Sarah awake, but before he could say anything, they both heard it. A faint crunch of leaves outside the tent. "Probably just an animal," Jason whispered, though his voice betrayed his unease. But Sarah shook her head. "That's not an animal. That's footsteps." The footsteps grew louder, slow and deliberate, as if someone or something was circling their campsite. Jason's heart raced. He grabbed the flashlight and unzipped the tent just enough to peer out. The beam of light cut through the darkness, but he saw nothing. The footsteps stopped. Then a low, raspy voice spoke from the darkness, chilling them to their core. "I see you." Jason and Sarah froze. There was no one there, no sign of movement, yet the voice had been unmistakable. It was close, too close. Without saying a word, they grabbed their keys, abandoning their gear, and bolted for the car. As they ran, the voice followed them, whispering, "I see you. I'm watching." They reached the car and sped off, hearts pounding, hands shaking. The voice echoed in their minds long after they had left the park behind. When they returned the next day to retrieve their belongings, their campsite was untouched. But there, in the dirt around the tent, were footprints, large, deep, and too human for comfort. Story 3. The Lantern Man. In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, brothers Eric and Daniel decided to spend a weekend camping. The locals had warned them about the Lantern Man, a ghostly figure said to haunt the forest, luring campers away with the glow of a lantern. Eric laughed it off, dismissing it as a silly ghost story, but Daniel was a bit more superstitious. "We'll be fine," Eric assured him. The first night was uneventful, though the silence of the forest felt oppressive, as if it were holding its breath. As they sat around the fire on the second night, Eric noticed a faint light in the distance. "What's that?" he asked, pointing through the trees. It was a dim, flickering glow, like a lantern swaying gently in the breeze. "It's probably another camper," Eric said, though something about it seemed off. The light moved slowly, almost deliberately through the trees. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. "That's no camper." Eric, ever the skeptic, decided to investigate. "Come on, let's check it out. It's probably just someone hiking." Daniel hesitated but followed his brother. As they approached, the light grew brighter, but its source remained obscured by the thick foliage. It was almost hypnotic, drawing them in step by step. "Hello," Eric called out, but there was no answer. Suddenly, the light vanished, plunging them into darkness. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. "We need to go back," he whispered, but Eric seemed transfixed. "It was right here," he muttered, moving forward as if in a trance. "I swear I saw it." Then from behind them, a voice, a low, hollow whisper spoke. "Come closer." They turned, but all they could see was darkness. Panic set in. They began to run, but no matter which way they went, they couldn't find their way back to the campsite. The light appeared again, further ahead this time, taunting them, leading them deeper into the woods. The whispers followed, growing louder, more insistent. "Come closer. Come closer." Hours seemed to pass, the forest a labyrinth of shadows and fear. Just when they thought they were lost for good, the light vanished for the final time, and they stumbled back into their campsite, breathless and terrified. The next morning, they packed up and left without a word. As they drove away, Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror and saw it, the lantern light flickering in the distance, watching them leave. Final thoughts. Camping is meant to be a way to escape the noise of the world, but sometimes the isolation of the wilderness brings you closer to something far more sinister. Whether it's whispers in the trees, unseen figures watching from the dark, or something else entirely, the night can hide horrors we aren't prepared to face. For these campers, the forest was not a sanctuary but a trap, and the terror they faced will forever be etched in their minds.